Aloha, welcome back to the Anxiety Coaches Podcast. I'm your host and coach, Gina Ryan, and I'm so happy to be with you again today as we consider the many ways to bring your mind and body back to its natural peace and calm. Welcome, everybody. Here we are again at the Anxiety Coaches Podcast, and today I have a very special guest for you. I am so thrilled to actually be meeting with and know of Dr. Drew Ramsey. So I want to share a little bit about him, and then we're going to get into a conversation because we have a lot to talk to you about. Dr. Drew Ramsey is a board-certified integrative psychiatrist. He's a best-selling author and a leading voice in nutritional psychiatry and mental fitness. He served for 20 years as an assistant clinical professor of psychiatry at Columbia University's Vagelos College of Physicians and Surgeons, and is the founder of the Brain Food Clinic in New York City, and also the Spruce Mental Health in Jackson, Wyoming. A sought-after speaker and educator, his work has been featured widely in the media, and he has a new book. It's titled Healing the Modern Brain, 9 Tenets to Build Mental Fitness and Revitalize Your Mind. And the book will be available as you are hearing this show. Dr. Ramsey argues that we've become over-reliant on pharmaceuticals for treating mental health issues and underestimate the power of nutrition and lifestyle choices to build our mental fitness. It's a radical and personal form of self-care that involves adopting a series of small lifestyle changes to enhance mental health and well-being. So now you know why I'm so excited to have him with us. And I want to dive into a powerful connection between food and mental health. Welcome, Dr. Ramsey.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Gina. Hey, everybody, it's really a treat to be with you all. I'm so excited to spend some time talking about mental fitness and nutritional psychiatry and answering your questions.
Awesome. You know, Drew, often I share with my listeners and my clients that our greatest challenges can also be our most powerful teachers, guiding us forward in life. And so I always ask guests if they could share a time, perhaps when you, Drew, faced your own struggles with health or wellness and how you navigated that journey toward healing and landed in your own career on nutritional psychiatry. I'd love to hear.
Well, sure. Thank you for asking. I think like a lot of people interested in mental health, I've had a variety of challenging times in my life. As you were talking, I was thinking, I think I'm still on the journey. I mean, I'm in the middle of a book launch and celebrating this book coming out and have a wonderful practice and wonderful family. And there are still a lot of mental health challenges on my radar, as it were, like a lot of people my age, whether it's trying to address those anxieties and worries you have about your kids in this world today, being a parent, trying to understand what they're facing, or taking care of our parents. But I think about specific times, I think a lot of them are when I was younger and I was a little less oriented. Maybe it's the times like when I was in college and I was on a low-fat vegetarian diet and falling asleep in class every afternoon and kind of foggy in my head. Or, there's certainly been some times early when I moved to New York to train at Columbia as a psychiatrist where I was in something of a new culture, being from very rural Indiana and suddenly being in Manhattan, being at really one of the, top places in psychiatry. It was a big transition for me. And so, a lot of this book comes from my story in terms of some of the struggles and challenges I've had, but also really tries to focus on some of my patients and the lessons that, really over the years I learned from them that have helped me get through. And some of them are lessons that we've all had, that we know, like when we move our bodies, we feel better and we sleep better, or when we eat more nutrient-dense food and feel more control over our food and food choices, we feel more secure and our mood is a little better. And so I wanted to, share both some stories where there are transitions like I talk about in the book where I share in the book, our family's very blessed now to be settled in a pretty, I wouldn't say rural Wyoming, but pretty isolated Wyoming. We're in Jackson, so a town of about 10, 15,000 people. After about 20 years in New York, we moved back to my parents' farm. And so going from, this really stimulating, exciting urban setting that I had adapted to as best I
Mhm.
could, but I'm a farm boy at heart. And then getting back to my parents' farm and then moving to a new community, which is just, it's hard to describe Jackson. It's just a very special place in terms of mental health. It's a place like a lot of intermountain town regions that has a bunch of mental health challenges. What I find really interesting here is they're very explicit about it. I've never lived in a small community. They've done 2 community-wide surveys, kind of looking at the mental health. There are 7 or 8 large mental health nonprofits. I mean, it's just really, there's a lot of clinicians, by some counts, probably more mental health clinicians here than anywhere in the world. And so when I think about like times in my life, as you can hear, I go through several different phases. And I would say in each of those, the challenges are maybe different. Some very adult challenges, like being a mid-career professional and a
Mhm.
parent, which I bet a lot of you listening know, it's just like, okay, you hope you feel me there. And then I think probably some explicit times, it's different today in the media, Gina, and everybody
Yeah.
listening, where people, physicians, influencers talk really explicitly about their mental health, their depressive episodes. And I think that's really wonderful. I'm kind of a generation of psychiatrists, and maybe in some ways like stigmatizing, where I
Mm.
almost think about it as I don't share a ton about that. A little bit about some depression. I share with people I stopped drinking 3.5, 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But the kind of nitty gritty details, what I've done, who I've seen, what I've taken, I probably share a little bit less than that than sometimes I feel like I should. I think what you're alluding to in a lot of ways is I hope to be one of the people in the space who I'm an active psychopharmaceutical prescriber. And so
Mhm.
when I say, hey, I think we've become overly reliant on it, as you put, what I mean by that is that I think medications are very effective for sets of
Mhm.
symptoms, for certain individuals, for certain genotypes, meaning certain people just do a lot better on some different types of medications. But when we think that's all there is to our mental health,
Mhm.
I think we're doing a disservice both to ourselves and to kind of modern mental health and psychopharmacology because it speaks to a kind of a silver bullet solution idea
Yeah.
to the complexity of our mental health. And that's really, where this idea of mental fitness in some ways comes in.
Mhm.
As you think about, just think about a clinical scenario, or I share several in the book, but someone comes to see me for clinical depression and they're
Mhm.
eating poorly and they're not moving their body and they're not really connected or having relationships. They don't feel engaged in work.
Mhm.
Certainly treating a depression or anxiety will help with some of those things. But without like some specific framework, effort, commitment to building out more of these aspects of mental fitness, I don't think we're doing all that we need to do for our mental health. And
Mhm.
part of where this book really came about now was just my impression, and I hope a lot of you listening agree that we're just up against more. And
Yeah.
so we need to bring more to the fight for our mental health. And that's what I think mental fitness is. It's, saying that every week, I don't want you to just think, did you do the exercise? Did you eat the vegetables? I mean,
Mhm.
those are great, but I wanted us all to be thinking, well, what's the most important aspect of my mental health I focused on this week? And when I did that, I found it was a little too broad. I needed to focus in. And so I thought, like, where are the things that kind of always work? Like, if I could wave my psychiatric magic wand and like
Mhm.
deliver this to my patient's life, that it just, it's going to work. Like a new loving relationship is a good example. Boy, even if you're treating
Yeah.
someone with really severe depression, if they have a little love walk into their life, oh, that's a big smile. Like just
Yeah.
mood boost, mood lifts, things, the world looks different that next day. And as I thought I've been doing this for over 20 years now, there's just some things that seem to light us up, things that we
Yeah.
tend to push for or need in our lives. And I thought, why don't we be explicit? Mental health has gotten more complicated. I think a lot of people are in the weeds arguing about that as opposed to doing something today about your mental fitness. And I hope the
Yeah.
book helps people see that kind of as I have, that for all of my concerns, complaints, worries, etc., usually when I'm doing the best is when I'm taking good care of these tenets of mental fitness.
Yes, and that's the word that I love that you have kind of coined in my mind, the mental fitness, because when we think about getting fit physically, we think about it's a very proactive process. We don't just ask someone to give us a magic pill or wave a magic wand. We know if I'm going to get fit, this is going to take effort. I'm committed. There's things I have to do. And I actually would hope that we could look at our whole health like that, but start with mental health is fine with me. If we could look at getting mentally fit, because seems to have, I don't know, the word has been overused or something, because it's often from outside of ourselves versus fitness really has to come from within. Would you agree with that? Is that the point you're trying to make with
Yeah,
this
I have,
wonderful
yes.
book?
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing the book and being excited about it, Gina. It means a lot, especially as someone in the field. And I think that's exactly right. I'm all for people taking medications, getting consults, doing therapy. I've done a ton of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Love all that stuff. And
Yeah.
just when we think about, okay, it's Tuesday morning, it's 7 a.m., you've got a little bit of time. I know that when I end up doom scrolling, as opposed to a little bit of my mental fitness routine, the day doesn't go as well. My days are still good for the most part, but it's just not as good when
Yeah.
I lose a sense of engagement with something. I just feel like I'm going through the motions. Oh, really hard. Well, how do we keep that? What I call the tenet of engagement. How do you keep that
Mm-hmm.
engagement up? And like anything, if we're not paying attention to it in our lives, especially today, my experience is the modern world kind of creeps in. If
Yeah.
I'm not careful, I'm worried about a lot of usually traumatic things going on far away from me. I'm maybe worried about the political situation. I'm reading news or I'm scrolling or I'm digesting whatever the algorithm of the social media platform I am is serving up to me. Just,
Right.
it's not an engaged existence. It's not helping me achieve my goals.
Right.
And so that's really you're quite right. I'm kind of asking us all, hey, like the mental health epidemic keeps getting worse,
Mm.
and let's
Yeah.
stop looking around and externalizing and kind of hoping for a solution. I don't mean that there aren't going to be new treatments or new medicines or new breakthroughs or new research. Sure there
Right.
will be, but that in front of all of us, as I learned with my nutritional psychiatry, in front of all of us are a set of choices.
Mm.
And I don't think we're framing them that way. And if you frame it that there are a set of choices, and there are a set of choices that keep your brain growing, keep it repairing itself, keep inflammation low. From we know of the last maybe 15 or 20 years of modern brain science, just good choices that you should be making, activities you should be engaging in to keep your brain optimally healthy. And the
Yeah.
request is like, hey, I think more of that is good for you. And I hope this book helps people really
Yeah.
kind of grab that by the horns and do more of it.
Yes. And I think people are, pardon the pun, hungry for it. I think people are looking more and more, even though I know there's a lot of reliance on pharmaceuticals, and we don't need to get into all of that at all because you have stated where you stand very nicely. But I think we've kind of been trained, even when I was working in eating disorders with all of the wonderful, wonderful women that actually taught me a lot. There's like a little funnel, you get kind of funneled in when you don't know ask the right questions or to even care for your own self well enough to know, oh, I'm off because I did XYZ. We don't even have that awareness sometimes. So, this is why your 9 tenets can really be helpful to people. Go right
Well,
ahead.
thank you for saying that. That in some ways it's a perfect segue because it's exactly where the book starts. The first tenet of mental fitness is self-awareness.
Mm,
And it's because I really believe in self-actualization, that within all of us is a progression.
mm,
My knowledge of food, how I feed myself, how I eat, how I feed my family, it's different than 15 years ago. My family's different than 15 years ago. Same thing with my movement.
yeah.
How I think about exercise now in my early 50s as opposed to, 20 years ago, 30 years
Hmm.
ago when I was a college athlete, radically different. And
Yeah.
so we progress and grow, and having the self-awareness where we are in our path, whether it's maybe struggling and feeling a little confused in our 20s, or, in our 30s, boy, so much happens in the 30s. Um, or in our 40s, where a lot of times, there's a mix of both, great kind of success and depth, but also a realization of paths we didn't take. So many stages in adult development. And so self-awareness and it's getting oriented, like, where are you? And as I describe it, if life is a poker game and you are dealt a set of cards, really looking at those cards quite clearly. A lot of
Yeah.
times we, have a lot of denial and resentment and frustration about the reality of our situation. I certainly appreciate that. But self-awareness is for all of us about understanding the cards that we have been dealt to the best of our abilities. And that's the only way we can play well. And so
Yeah.
often we're trying to play well. We're trying to optimize. We're, eating more of this or doing this particular routine. And, it isn't done in a context of self-awareness of
Mhm.
whether those things necessarily fit right now in your life or whether that's actually the thing that you need. And so I try to use some techniques from my clinical office. I'm mostly a clinician and a psychotherapist,
Mhm.
but I've had patients on the couch all day, so
Mhm.
I've still got a
Yes.
couch. It's maybe a
I
little
love it.
atypical. It's a little atypical maybe for psychiatrists. Most of us are trained to do psychotherapy. Not a lot of programs really focus on it as much as my training did.
Okay.
And it's certainly something that I found to be very effective and essential, and also kind of taught me about this, that as people kind of come and stabilize and achieve their initial treatment goals, and then they stay,
Mm.
there's a question of like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like what is the process at hand? And I found for a lot of people, they were like up leveling.
Yeah.
They were kind of, they'd stopped drinking, they'd gotten their depression better treated, they were engaging more deeply in relationships, and they want to keep going.
Mhm. This is a good place to stop for today, but don't go anywhere because we're diving even deeper and continuing our conversation. Be sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it, and I'll see you in the next episode with Dr. Drew Ramsey. I'll be back in a few more days with another podcast. Until then, be well and aloha.